No name signed, but it didn't need one. The Warden's lighthouse was infamous along the coast. Every fisherman, every sailor, even the smugglers who haunted the shoals knew of its beam. They said it could split fog, carve darkness, and guide the lost. But they also whispered that its light had burned too long, longer than fuel should allow, longer than any keeper should endure. The assignment reached Detective Pierce after midnight. By dawn, he was on the northbound train, the coastal line rattling through pine forests and gull-choked marshes. The telegram sat folded in his coat pocket, the paper softening from how many times he had thumbed its creases. Each reading unsettled him more. Not the desperation, he had seen that before, but the phrase, "Must not be me." By evening the train delivered him to Ashcombe, the last harbor town before the cliffs. Rain lashed the cobbles, and the sea roared unseen beyond the fog. Locals barely glanced at the stranger in the trench coat, though their silence deepened when he asked for passage to the lighthouse. At last, an old fisherman with a scarred cheek muttered that he would row him across. If the tide didn't eat us first. The boat was small, its boards swollen from years of brine. Each stroke of the oars groaned. Fog wrapped the harbor until it vanished, leaving only the slap of waves and the wheeze of the old man's breath. Then, faint and high, a beam cut through the mist. Not golden, not warm, but pale, too pale. The lighthouse. The fisherman spat over the side. That light don't guide no ship. It calls them. When the hull scraped rock at the base of the cliff, he refused payment, shoving Pierce toward the slick ladder bolted to stone. "I'll not wait for you. If you ain't back before the moon sets, I'll count you drowned." The climb was brutal. Salt spray stung his eyes, and the iron rungs bit cold through his gloves. Above, the cliff loomed, jagged and wet. At last he hauled himself onto the narrow ledge, boots slipping on sea-slick moss. The lighthouse rose before him, a tower of blackened stone, tall as a cathedral, its glass eye sweeping the fog with that unnatural light. The keeper's house clung to its base, wood siding warped by storms, windows shuttered. Yet the chimney smoked faintly, and the door stood ajar. Pierce drew his revolver before stepping inside. The house smelled of brine and burned oil. Lamps guttered in their sconces, throwing weak light across peeling wallpaper. A table was set for one, plates still streaked with stew, the broth long since congealed. A chair lay toppled, as though kicked aside in haste. He called out once. Twice. No answer. Upstairs, he found the keeper's room. The bed was unmade, sheets damp with sweat. On the desk lay a logbook, pages covered in cramped handwriting. He flipped through them, scanning. The entries began ordinary: weather reports, fuel tallies, supply shortages. But as weeks passed, the script grew erratic, ink blotched, margins filled with sketches, spirals, eyes, waves swallowing towers. One entry chilled him more than the rest. "The light is no longer mine. It turns itself. And sometimes, when I sleep, I dream I am the beam. I look out from the glass, and I see things crawling across the water, coming closer." The final entry was written the same day as the telegram. The words were smeared, as if written in shaking hand. "They knock at the door beneath the waves. If I do not answer, who will?" The room fell silent around him, but the detective sensed movement, faint, rhythmic. Not in the house. Beneath it. A dull thud, like waves striking hollow stone. He left the room, descended narrow stairs, and found the trapdoor in the kitchen floor. Rusted hinges protested as he pulled it open, revealing a ladder into the cellar. Lantern in hand, he descended into the damp. The cellar smelled of mold and seawater. Barrels lined the walls, some split open, contents spoiled. But it was not the rot that drew his eye. It was the waterline creeping across the stone floor, seeping from cracks, pulsing with the tide. And there, carved deep into the foundation, were marks. Circles interlocked with spirals, etched by hand or by something sharper. They glistened, wet. The thudding grew louder. Not waves. Knocks. From beneath the foundation. 3 slow raps. Silence. Then 3 again. Pierce lifted his lantern higher. The water quivered. And in its reflection, he saw not his own face but another, hollow eyes, lips moving soundlessly. The lantern flickered. And the knocking stopped. The cellar was still, but not silent. Drips of water fell from the ceiling in steady rhythm, though they did not match the tempo of the knocks. The sound came from deeper, beneath stone and salt, as if the sea itself were rapping against the foundations in deliberate signal. Pierce knelt beside the cracks where water seeped through. The tide pulsed like breath, pushing in, pulling back. He touched the stone. It was warm. Too warm for seawater. His lantern guttered. The reflection in the water did not vanish. The pale-eyed face lingered, lips shaping syllables without sound. He strained to listen. No words came, only the sensation that they were not meant for ears. They pressed against his thoughts instead, impressions more than language. Hunger. Invitation. Return. He stood quickly, hand on the revolver. But the cellar was empty. Only barrels, rot, and the sea scratching at the stone. As he turned toward the ladder, his boots struck something half buried in the water. A book. Small, leather-bound, swollen with damp. He pulled it free and saw the initials EC pressed into the cover. The keeper's diary. Unlike the logbook upstairs, this one was private. The handwriting within was uneven, slanting wildly as the pages progressed. The earliest entries spoke of isolation, storms, missed shipments. Then came complaints of voices on the wind, shapes in the fog, lights moving beneath the water. The final pages descended into obsession, drawings of a wheel of light, of hands reaching upward from the tide, of doors opening in black stone. One phrase repeated over and over, scrawled until ink tore the page. Not me at the wheel. Not me. He closed the diary and shoved it inside his coat. The cellar seemed to exhale, the air damp against his neck. He climbed out, sealed the trapdoor, and bolted it. Whatever had been knocking could remain unanswered. For now. Upstairs, the house groaned. Wind pressed against the shutters, though outside no storm raged. The unnatural beam from the lantern room swept across the windows, spilling white light that made dust motes glitter like ash. He decided to climb. The tower stairs spiraled narrow and steep, iron railings slick with salt. Each step echoed strangely, the sound lingering too long, as though the stairwell were deeper than its dimensions allowed. Halfway up, he found another door, locked, but not tightly. With effort, he forced it open. Inside lay the equipment room, gears, pulleys, canisters of fuel, spare lenses. Yet everything was wrong. The machinery moved without touch, wheels turning in perfect rhythm though no hands guided them. The great crank that rotated the lantern above spun steadily, yet its lever stood untouched. He reached for it. The moment his fingers brushed the metal, it burned, searing like a coal. He jerked back, teeth clenched. The wheel kept turning. And then the lantern beam above swept across the room. For an instant, the machinery was gone. Instead he saw a vision, endless water stretching black beneath a starless sky, ships drifting unmanned, their sails hanging limp. And in the center of that horizon stood a figure, tall, gaunt, faceless, hands fixed to a wheel of light. When the beam passed, the machinery returned. But the smell of salt and decay lingered. He ascended further. The lantern chamber at the top loomed vast, glass panes rattling against the storm outside. The great lens rotated slowly, casting its pale beam across the sea. But the flame at its center was no ordinary fire. It did not flicker. It pulsed, steady as a heartbeat, glowing too white, too cold. It was alive. Beside the flame lay a chair, shackles fixed to its arms and legs, as though the keeper had once been bound there, forced to watch the light. Pierce's stomach turned. He had seen torture chambers less cruel. A scrap of paper lay on the floor, caught against the glass. He bent to retrieve it. The same cramped hand as the diary, only more frantic. The wheel turns itself. When I close my eyes, I turn with it. It is inside me. If I stop, it stops. If I falter, it falters. But I am not me. Not me. The paper shook in his hand. A sudden sound made him whirl. Footsteps on the stairs below. Not the old fisherman. Not the keeper. Heavy, deliberate steps, ascending. He raised his revolver, lantern in the other hand. Shadows twisted across the stairwell. And then a figure emerged. It was the keeper. Or what remained. His beard was unkempt, face hollow, eyes ringed black as bruises. But his gaze was blank, unfocused, like a sleepwalker's. He stepped into the chamber, hands raw and bleeding, and moved past Pierce without recognition. Straight to the shackled chair. He sat. The shackles clamped shut of their own accord. His lips moved, whispering words drowned by the pulse of the flame. Then his eyes rolled white, and the wheel groaned. The beam stretched wider, sweeping across the horizon with unnatural speed. Outside, the sea answered. Shapes rose in the fog. From the lantern glass, Pierce saw them. At first he thought them ships, hulks drifting closer. But their outlines warped, too narrow, too long. Some crawled across the waves like insects, limbs piercing the surface before vanishing again. Others rose higher than masts, bending as though made of water and shadow both. The beam struck them, and they shuddered. Not with pain, with recognition. They turned toward the lighthouse. The keeper groaned, voice breaking. Not me, not me! The shackles tightened, his wrists bleeding. Pierce lunged forward, grabbing his shoulders. What is it? What are you bringing here? The man's head snapped toward him, and for the first time, focus burned in his eyes. Not his own focus, something else looking out from behind. The door must open, it said through cracked lips. The sea remembers. The hollow waits. And then he screamed, thrashing against the restraints. The lantern flared, and every shape in the fog screamed back. The lantern flame pulsed, beating like a heart. Each surge of its light stretched across the fog, cutting the sea into pale fragments. Shapes writhed within that glow, some shying from it, others twisting eagerly closer. The lighthouse had become a beacon not of safety but of summons. The keeper strained against his shackles, his screams echoing through the chamber. The sound carried down the spiral stair, reverberating like a warning to no one but stone. His wrists bled freely, trickles dark against pale skin. Yet the chains tightened as though feeding on his struggle. Pierce braced himself against the chair, shouting over the roar of the flame. How do I stop this? Tell me! The keeper's mouth opened, but the voice that answered was not his. You cannot stop what was never yours. The words carried weight, vibrating through the chamber, rattling the great glass. The flame flared brighter still, and the shapes in the fog shrieked in unison, their cries rolling over the sea like thunder. Pierce stepped back, revolver raised, though bullets meant little against this. Still, habit anchored him. The keeper's body sagged suddenly, head dropping forward as if consciousness had fled. The shackles slackened but did not release. The wheel continued turning on its own. and then silence. The pulse of the flames slowed. The shapes in the fog paused, hovering at the edge of vision. Waiting. Watching. The detective steadied his breath. He needed distance. From the wheel, from the flame, from whatever lived inside the keeper now. He descended quickly, boots clanging against iron stairs, the revolver firm in his grip. Each step echoed like a clock ticking down. At the base of the tower, the house groaned. A storm had risen without warning, waves battering the cliff, rain slashing the shutters. Yet when he glanced through a narrow window, the sky was not storm-dark but moonlit, stars visible beyond racing clouds. The contradiction made his skin crawl. He stepped outside. The clifftop path stretched toward the supply shed and signal post. Wind tore at his coat, carrying brine and something else, an odor of rot, of things long drowned. Below, the fisherman's boat was gone. The old man had kept his word. No rescue would come with the tide. A voice cut through the storm. Not from the sea, but from inland. "Pierce!" He turned sharply, hand on his revolver. Two figures struggled up the path from the cliff ladder. One carried a lantern shielded by his coat. The other hauled the trunk between them, its iron clasps glinting. They were soaked, hair plastered to their foreheads, boots slipping on moss. The taller of the two called again. "Pierce, thank God. We thought we'd lost you." He recognized them at once. Inspector Marlowe, broad-shouldered, gray-streaked beard, his former colleague from the city bureau. And behind him, Dr. Helena Ward, a scholar of arcane histories he had crossed paths with during another case better left unspoken. The trunk she dragged looked heavy enough to contain rifles. Or chains. "What in hell are you doing here?" Pierce demanded, his voice raw against the wind. "Same reason you are," Marlowe said grimly. "The telegram reached more than one desk. And if half the rumors about this lighthouse are true, you'll need more than one revolver." Ward straightened, wiping rain from her brow. "We brought records. Old ones. And instruments. There's more to this place than deranged keepers. The light was not built to guide ships. It was built to guard against something worse." Pierce said nothing, but his hand tightened on the revolver. He thought of the diary in his coat, of the shackles, of the shapes writhing in fog. Guard against, or invite? Inside the house, they set their lantern on the table, the flame wavering but steady. Marlowe pried the trunk open, revealing bundled rifles, cartridges, and a coil of iron chain etched with unfamiliar symbols. Ward unrolled a bundle of papers, water-damaged maps, sketches, transcripts. "This lighthouse," she said, spreading them across the table, "was not the first. Coastal records show a tower here 2 centuries before the Crown built this one. Local superstition called it the Warden's fire. They said it kept something beneath the waves asleep." She tapped a sketch, a crude spiral carved into stone, identical to the markings Pierce had seen in the cellar. "Every generation," she continued, "a keeper was chosen. Not just to maintain the light, but to bear it. To keep it bound to human will. Without that vessel, the wheel turns on its own. And when it turns alone..." "The sea answers," Pierce finished. Marlowe loaded a rifle, sliding it across the table. "Then we keep it from turning. Simple as that." "Simple?" Ward's laugh was sharp. "You didn't see what I saw on the water. They're already awake." Pierce considered the words carefully. The keeper upstairs. The shapes in fog. The knocks beneath the cellar. All pieces of a puzzle too vast to glimpse in full. Yet every instinct told him the same truth. The lighthouse was not just a structure. It was a seal, and seals break. He drew the diary from his coat and set it beside Ward's papers. She flipped through quickly, eyes narrowing. "This confirms it." she whispered. The keeper's mind was unraveling. The wheel forced itself through him. When he wrote "not me," he meant the light itself was turning through his body. Then why call for help? Marlowe asked. Why risk anyone else? Pierce met his gaze. Because he couldn't stop it alone. A shudder ran through the house, knocking plates from shelves. The lantern flared and nearly went out. They rushed to the window. The beam above had changed. It no longer pulsed steady but jerked erratically, stuttering across the waves like a heartbeat faltering. Each time it faltered, the shapes in the fog pressed closer. Dark limbs broke the surface, dragging across rock. A mast snapped in the distance, though no ship had been visible. The keeper's scream echoed faintly from the tower, raw and unending. Ward pressed her hand against the glass, breath fogging. He won't last much longer. If the vessel breaks. The ground trembled, a low vibration rising through the stone foundations. From beneath came the knock. 3 raps. Silence. 3 again. Louder now. Marlowe cursed, grabbing his rifle. Whatever set that door beneath us, it doesn't intend to wait. Pierce's gaze shifted to the trapdoor. The cellar. The cracks. The warm stone. The face in the water. His gut twisted. The knocking wasn't a threat. It was a rhythm. A call and answer. And the light above was answering. If one door opened, the other would follow. They armed themselves quickly. Marlowe with rifle and chain. Ward with lantern and papers. Pierce kept his revolver close, though the weight felt smaller with every scream from the tower. They ascended together, each step shaking with the tremors of the sea. Halfway up, the sound changed. Not just knocks now. Scratching. Nails dragging stone. From behind the walls. Ward paled. They're not outside anymore. The stairwell twisted. Shadows moved against the grain of their lanterns. At times, the steps stretched too far, doubling distance. At others, they folded back on themselves. The lighthouse was warping. When they reached the lantern chamber, the sight froze them. The keeper was gone. Only the shackles remained, still slick with blood. The wheel spun violently, flame flaring. The glass rattled in its frame. And outside, pressed against the panes, dozens of faces stared inward. Bloated, drowned, eyeless. Their mouths opened wide, but no sound carried through the storm. Until the glass cracked. The first crack was a whisper, thin as frost splitting across a pond. Then another, deeper, jagged, crawling through the lantern glass like lightning trapped in crystal. Shards fell inward, tinkling across the iron grate. The drowned faces pressed closer, distorted by the fracture. Their mouths widened, skin splitting at the edges, teeth bared in silent screams. Pierce raised his revolver. Marlowe leveled his rifle. Ward clutched the lantern so tightly her knuckles whitened. None of them moved. Because instinct screamed what logic already knew, glass could not hold forever. The wheel spun faster, the flame inside writhing like a trapped serpent. Its glow painted the chamber in violent pulses, throwing their shadows long across the stone. With each pulse, the drowned pressed harder. Their bodies flattened grotesquely against the glass, arms bending wrong, spines twisting. And then, shatter. The lantern burst outward, shards exploding across the chamber. The storm howled in through the breach. Rain, salt, and something thicker spattered their faces. The drowned poured inside, not as water, but as bodies half real, half shadow, dragging themselves through the broken pane as if reality had thinned for them. Back! Marlowe barked, firing. The rifle's crack deafened in the enclosed chamber. One of the drowned staggered, its skull torn open. But instead of falling, it reeled forward, bones grinding, flesh knitting half shut. The hole in its face became another mouth, opening and closing like a fish gasping. Pierce fired twice, shots punching through another corpse's chest. It lurched but did not fall. Only when he aimed lower, snapping its knee, did it collapse, dragging itself on hands. Even then it came. Always forward. Always silent. Ward shouted over the storm. "The wheel! Stop the wheel!" Pierce saw it, still spinning, uncontrolled, the flame within spilling light like blood from a wound. The drowned were not invading by their own will. They were being pulled. He rushed forward, boots slipping on wet stone. One corpse lunged, jaws snapping inches from his throat. He slammed the revolver into its temple, firing point blank. Skull fragments sprayed the wall. The body twitched but still clawed forward until Marlowe's chain wrapped tight around its neck, yanking it back. "Go!" Marlowe roared, dragging it down. Pierce reached the wheel. Its handle spun too fast to grip, metal scalding hot. The flame inside lashed like a living thing, tendrils striking the chamber. One grazed his sleeve, burning fabric to ash in a breath. The smell of seared cloth and skin filled his nose. Ward was beside him now, slamming her lantern down, glass against glass. "Help me bind it!" she screamed. Together they heaved the iron chain across the wheel, forcing it between the spokes. The etched symbols flared, resisting, then bit deep. The wheel jerked, sparks flying. The flame shrieked, not sound, but vibration tearing through bone. The drowned staggered, clutching their heads. "Now!" Ward shouted. Pierce seized the wheel and wrenched. His muscles burned, palms blistering, but the chain held. The wheel slowed, caught, then locked. The flame flickered wildly, then imploded into a single point of light. Darkness crashed over the chamber. For a heartbeat, only rain and ragged breaths. Then, the drowned collapsed, bodies dissolving to brine and rot. They sloughed into puddles, trickling back through the broken pane, leaving only the reek of decay. The chain glowed faintly, heat fading. The wheel sat still. Marlowe dropped the corpse tangled in his chain, panting. "Tell me that's finished it." Ward shook her head slowly, eyes fixed on the guttering point of light. "Not finished." Paused. The detective holstered his revolver, though his hand lingered on the grip. "Then we need to know what comes next." They retreated from the lantern chamber, descending into the house below. Every groan of timber felt like a warning. The storm outside raged, but the wheel's silence gnawed louder. In the parlor, Ward spread her papers again, hands trembling. "The chain won't hold forever. These symbols, see here, they're temporary bindings. Designed to delay, not to seal." Marlowe poured whiskey from a flask, passing it without a word. His eyes were bloodshot, his beard dripping rain. "Then what seals it?" Ward hesitated, glancing at Pierce. Her voice dropped. "A vessel." The words sat heavy. Pierce recalled the keeper's eyes, the diary entries, the phrase "not me." Marlowe spat on the floor. "So some poor bastard shackled to a wheel for eternity is the grand solution?" "That's how it was done before," Ward replied. "Each keeper was chosen. Bound. Sacrificed if you like. Without one, the light consumes itself, and calls what it was meant to restrain. And you knew this," Pierce said evenly. Her gaze flickered but did not break. "I suspected. The records were vague. I didn't think the cycle would break so soon." "Soon?" Marlowe snapped. "The last keepers barely cold." They fell into silence. Only the storm filled the room, battering shutters, clawing at the stone. Then, a sound beneath. Not knocking. Not scratching. Breathing. Slow, ragged, and human. Rising from the cellar like smoke. Ward's face paled. It's awake. Pierce drew his revolver, moving to the trapdoor. Marlowe raised his rifle. Ward held her lantern close, as though flame could shield thought itself. The breathing deepened, a wet inhale, a wheeze, a sigh. Then speech. Name them. The words came from below, guttural, as though learned poorly by a throat not made for human sounds. Name them, it repeated. The vessel must be named. Pierce froze. He thought of the ledger in the museum, of names written in bleeding ink. He thought of the diary in his pocket, entries signed with a trembling hand. He thought of the wheel upstairs, still humming faintly through the chain. The voice rose again, louder, closer. Name them, or the hollow sea will choose. Marlowe swore under his breath. Not me. Ward's knuckles whitened on the lantern. If we don't choose, it will. The detective felt the weight of both their stares. His pulse thudded in his ears. The revolver felt heavier than steel, heavier than truth. From above, the flame flickered again. The chain rattled. The voice hissed one last time. Name them. And then silence. The silence after the command was worse than the storm. The house seemed to hold its breath, walls groaning as though listening for their answer. Pierce kept his revolver trained on the trapdoor, though he knew the weapon meant little against what breathed below. His mind turned over the words, name them, like stones in a hand. He could feel the weight of choice pressing against his ribs. Marlowe broke the quiet first. His voice was a rasp, edged with fury and fear. It's a trick. Just a voice. We don't give it a damn thing. Ward shook her head, clutching the lantern closer. You don't understand. If the vessel isn't chosen willingly, it will be taken. That's what the records warned. Voluntary binds. Involuntary ones rupture the wheel. Pierce asked flatly. And then? Ward's eyes flicked toward the ceiling, toward the chained wheel. Then it burns through everything. The flame tears the lighthouse apart. And what lies beneath comes with it. The wind howled through a broken shutter, rain striking like nails against glass. The detective felt every second stretch thin. Suppose we play along, Marlowe said. Suppose one of us agrees. Then what? They sit up there spinning that damned wheel until the sea eats them alive? Yes, Ward whispered. The word was so simple, so final, that Marlowe recoiled as if struck. He laughed once, bitterly. Not me. The trapdoor shuddered beneath their feet. Dust rained from the joists. The voice below rumbled again, lower now, like a tide turning. Name them. Pierce holstered his revolver, though the motion felt like surrender. We don't decide anything in this room. We need answers. Ward blinked. Where? The cellar, he said. Marlowe swore aloud, the sound harsh over the storm. You're insane. That thing's waiting. Pierce adjusted his coat, pulling the diary from his pocket. Its pages fluttered open without wind, landing on the last entry. Not me. The keeper's final words. He faced it. So will we. The trapdoor groaned as they pried it open. A sour draft spilled up, thick with brine and mildew. Lantern light barely penetrated the dark below, but the outline of stone steps descended, slick with moss. Pierce went first, revolver in one hand, diary in the other. Each step felt like sinking deeper into a grave. Ward followed, her lantern bobbing, casting skeletal shadows along the walls. Marlowe brought up the rear, rifle barrel sweeping. The cellar spread wide, larger than the foundation of the house should have allowed. Stone arches disappeared into blackness. Water pooled ankle-deep, rippling as though stirred by unseen tides. And in the center rose a shape. A column of stone, rough and jagged, carved with spirals that seemed to writhe in lantern light. At its peak, a hollow basin glowed faintly, not flame, not reflection, but something pale, shifting, alive. The glow painted the walls in liquid silver. Pierce felt his breath catch. It was not the wheel above, yet it resonated with the same pulse. The same hunger. Ward's whisper trembled. The root. The wellspring. The lantern feeds from here. The voice came again, but not from below. From everywhere. It seeped through the walls, through the water, through their bones. Name them. The glow flared, spilling shapes across the walls. Faces. Not the drowned, not corpses, but their own. Pierce saw himself in twisted reflection, eyes hollow, jaw slack. He turned, but the image followed. Ward's reflection clawed at its own throat. Marlowe's tore at its skin with bloody nails. Marlowe cursed, firing into the wall. The bullet ricocheted, sparks hissing. The faces dissolved, only to reform again. It knows us, Ward said, pale as parchment. No, Pierce corrected softly. It is us. Or will be. The voice rumbled, patient, endless. Name them. They retreated up the steps, slamming the trapdoor shut. The storm had not eased. If anything, it raged harder, waves crashing against the cliff with cannon-shot force. The whole structure trembled. Marlowe slammed his flask on the table, sloshing whiskey across papers. We're not waiting to be picked off like livestock. We torch it. Lantern, cellar, the whole cursed place. Ward shook her head sharply. Fire doesn't consume it. Fire feeds it. That's what the flames are. Consumed names, consumed vessels. You'd only make it stronger. Then what, Professor? Marlowe snarled. We draw straws? You and your damned records put us here. Maybe it's your turn. Her lips thinned. If it comes to that. It has come to that. Pierce slammed a hand down, silencing both. Enough. We're not choosing yet. They stared. Marlowe's eyes burned with defiance, Ward's with despair. Pierce continued. The last keeper wrote not me. That wasn't fear, it was resistance. He found something. Some other way. That's why we're still standing. Ward frowned. Then what killed him? Pierce glanced toward the ceiling, where the chains still rattled faintly. Maybe he didn't die. Maybe he broke loose. The room went still at that thought. The night stretched on. They took turns watching the stairs, though none of them truly slept. Ward pored over her papers, sketching symbols in the margins until her hands cramped. Marlowe paced, muttering. Pierce read the diary again and again, searching for meaning between the lines. Just before dawn, the storm shifted. Not weaker, different. The roar of waves dulled. In its place rose another sound, a horn. Long, low, mournful. It rolled across the cliffs, echoing through the stone. Ward looked up sharply. That's not the sea. Marlowe moved to the window. Ship. But the fog outside was impenetrable. Only the horn sounded again, closer now. Pierce rose, holstering his revolver. We'll see who else answers. On the cliff below, as morning broke gray and bruised, a vessel appeared through the mist. Not a modern cutter, but a hulking shape of iron, rust streaking its sides. Its masts were broken, sails shredded, yet it moved steadily toward the lighthouse as if drawn by unseen tide. No crew manned the deck. The horn bellowed once more. And from the shore, through the rocks, figures began to climb. Ward gasped. Not sailors. Not alive. They were half-drowned things, seaweed clinging to their limbs, barnacles crusting their skin. Yet they moved with purpose, not the mindless hunger of the drowned from the lantern chamber. These walked upright, eyes fixed on the lighthouse. The chosen, Ward whispered. Marlowe raised his rifle. Not while I'm breathing. But Pierce caught his arm. Wait. Because he saw it now, every figure carried something. A shard of stone, etched with the same spirals as the column in the cellar. They weren't coming to kill. They were coming to complete the ritual. To bring offerings for the vessel. The horn bellowed again. And the wheel upstairs began to spin. The horn's call did not fade. It deepened, echoing through the stone like a heartbeat too slow for the living. Each note dragged at the air, thickening it, until the lantern flame in Ward's hands sputtered, nearly dying. She shielded it desperately, muttering fragments of old prayers or equations. It was hard to tell which. On the cliff below, the drowned figures climbed steadily. Their movements were wrong, neither clumsy nor natural. Every step was deliberate, as if rehearsed. Barnacle-crusted hands found purchase on the jagged rocks. Seaweed trailed behind like tattered banners. They carried shards of stone close to their chests, cradled like holy relics. Marlowe cursed under his breath and leaned his rifle against the window frame. Offerings, you said? Fine. Let's see how they like lead. Pierce didn't stop him this time. He needed to know what force moved these creatures, whether they could be broken, or whether death had already abandoned them. The crack of the shot rolled across the cliffs. One figure jerked as the bullet tore through its shoulder, spinning it half around. For a heartbeat, it swayed on the rocks. Then it straightened again. Flesh hung loose, shattered bone gleamed white, but it climbed still, never loosening its grip on the shard of stone. Help! Marlowe spat, working the bolt. He fired again. Another drowned thing staggered, its chest ripped open. Still it climbed. Still it carried its burden upward. Ward pressed closer to Pierce, her voice low. They aren't coming to fight. You saw. The stones, they're completing something. If they reach the root in the cellar, it will open. The wheel above groaned, chains rattling. Pierce felt the vibration through the floorboards, through his bones. The drowned weren't just climbing the cliffs. They were winding the mechanism, step by step, breath by breath. The detective spoke evenly. Then we don't let them in. Marlowe barked a bitter laugh. 3 of us, against a damn tide? Pierce glanced at the revolver holstered at his hip, then at the diary lying open on the table. We hold until we know more. They barricaded the lower door with broken furniture, hammering planks across the frame until the wood groaned. Marlowe kept firing in bursts, though each shot bought little more than time. Ward drew chalk from her satchel, scribbling symbols across the floorboards, tracing spirals that matched those carved into the cellar stone. Pierce studied her work. You think that will hold them? I think, she said tightly, that recognition matters. This place responds to patterns. The more of them we set against it, the longer we survive. Another horn blast shook the walls. This time, the sound came from within as much as without. The cellar door thudded beneath their feet, rattling. Ward's chalk cracked in her grip. They're beneath us already. The first impact against the barricade came at dawn proper. Wood splintered, nails shrieked against stone. Marlowe planted himself at the bottom of the stairwell, rifle braced. Pierce stood behind him, revolver steady, listening to the rhythm of the blows. Not frenzied, measured, as though the drowned kept time with some unseen conductor. The barricade burst. Cold seawater rushed in, washing over the floor. With it came the stench of rot and brine, heavy enough to choke. Figures forced their way through the gap, shoulders grinding wood apart. Pierce fired. One fell backward, skull cracking on the stones. Another crawled over its body, clutching its shard tighter. Ward shouted an incantation, or maybe just a plea, and the spiral sheet scrawled across the floor glowed faintly, repelling the first line of intruders. They shrieked without voices, jaws gaping in silence. But more pressed forward. Always more. Marlowe slammed a fresh clip into his rifle. "This isn't holding." "Upstairs," Pierce ordered. They retreated, boots slamming against the stairs, seawater chasing them step for step. The drowned flooded into the hall below, dragging their offerings like priests ascending an altar. By the time they reached the lantern chamber again, the wheel was spinning of its own accord. Chains clanged in rhythm, faster, tighter. The lantern's flames swelled, pale and hungry, casting shadows that writhed across the walls. Ward staggered. "It's feeding. Every step they take, every shard they bring, it's completing the vessel." Marlowe rounded on her, fury in his eyes. "And you knew! You knew this was more than research. You dragged us into this slaughterhouse." Her face was white, lips trembling. "I thought it was theory. Stories. I didn't know it was still alive." "Alive?" he snarled. "It's not alive, it's a mouth." The wheel spun faster, rattling, the lantern flame swelling until it filled the chamber with blinding white. Pierce holstered his revolver, stepping toward the blaze. "If it's a mouth," he said, voice steady, "then it can be closed." The drowned broke through the upper stairwell. They flooded the chamber like a tide, water pouring in around their limbs. Dozens, maybe hundreds, each carrying a fragment of stone. They knelt as one, forming a circle around the wheel. Their offerings pulsed faintly, spirals glowing to match the rhythm of the chain. Ward clutched Pierce's sleeve. "If the last piece is placed, it opens. Whoever it takes first, whoever it chooses, becomes the vessel. That's why it's demanding names. It's not asking, it's warning." The detective stepped into the circle. Marlowe swore, dragging Ward back toward the wall. "He's lost it. He's—" But Pierce's voice cut through the roar of the sea, the groan of the wheel, the silence of the drowned. "You want a vessel," he said, low but clear. "You'll have none." The drowned froze. Their hollow eyes lifted toward him. The shards in their hands quivered, glowing brighter. The wheel screamed, metal grinding against stone. And then, the horn sounded again. Not from sea or cellar, but from within the lantern itself. A sound so deep it cracked glass, split wood, buckled knees. The drowned collapsed as one, prostrating themselves. The shards they carried lifted from their hands, floating toward the lantern, spinning in orbit like broken planets. Ward cried out, shielding her eyes. Marlowe aimed his rifle wildly, firing into the storm of stone, but bullets vanished like sparks in a hurricane. The wheel spun faster, faster, until the chains tore free. Links snapped, whipping through the air. The lantern blazed open, not flame but void, a hunger made visible. From the darkness, a hand reached. Not flesh, not bone, shadow shaped like both. It reached for Pierce. He did not move. The diary weighed heavy in his coat, its last words burning like coal, "Not me." He raised his revolver, not to fire but to offer. He placed the weapon on the floor before the wheel. Then the diary. Then his own name spoken aloud. "Pierce." The lantern shrieked. The hand faltered. Ward gasped. "You can't." But Pierce cut her off, voice steady. "It asked for a name. It has mine." The drowned writhed, their forms unraveling into sea foam. The shards shattered midair, spirals dissolving into mist. The wheel buckled inward, folding into itself like paper consumed by flame. The lantern's blaze dimmed to a single ember. Silence. When the light faded, the chamber was empty. No drowned. No shards. Only the three of them, gasping in the wreckage. Pierce lowered his hand. His revolver was gone. The diary was gone. His name, still ringing in the air, felt heavier than before. Marlowe staggered to his feet. "What did you do?" Pierce stared at the dark ember glowing faintly on the floor. "Found it." Ward's eyes widened. "With yourself?" He didn't answer. Because in his chest, deep behind the steady beat of his heart, he could feel the wheel still turning. The silence did not last. For a few fragile moments, only the hiss of seawater against stone filled the lighthouse. The drowned were gone, the wheel shattered, the lantern reduced to a faint ember on the floor. Yet the chamber still seemed alive, pulsing faintly, as though the stone itself were breathing. Ward crouched near the ember, her hand trembling as she reached for it. "It shouldn't exist anymore," she whispered. "When the ritual fails, the vessel collapses. That's what the text said." Pierce's boot stepped between her and the glow. "Leave it." She looked up at him, startled. "Why?" "Because it isn't done." Marlowe barked a laugh, too loud, too brittle. His face was pale, eyes bloodshot from the salt and smoke. "You call that not done? We're still breathing, aren't we? They're gone. Hell, I'll torch this place and let the tide bury the ruins. Done enough for me." But Ward's expression darkened. "If he's right, and I think he is, it won't end just because the bodies are gone. The drowned were carriers, not causes. They brought the pieces, but they weren't the hunger itself. That ember is still the root." Pierce said nothing. His chest ached with each breath, as if something pressed outward from his ribs. He knew it wasn't just exhaustion. Something of the wheel's rhythm remained in him, coiled deep, turning slowly. He turned toward the window. Beyond the glass, the sea stretched gray and endless. But the waves were wrong. They didn't roll, they circled. A slow, massive spiral radiated outward from the base of the lighthouse, as though the ocean itself had been given a pattern to follow. "We're not leaving yet," Pierce said. Marlowe's jaw dropped. "What?" Pierce tapped the glass with a gloved finger. "Look." The soldier followed his gaze, then swore under his breath. "Christ. We're in the middle of it. A whirlpool without a center." Ward's face drained of color. "No. That isn't water moving. That's the current of the name." Pierce glanced at her. "Explain." She swallowed hard, hugging her satchel like a lifeline. "When you spoke your name into the lantern, it took root. It didn't devour, it accepted. You didn't close it. You redirected it. Now the hunger spirals outward through the sea, bound to your identity." Marlowe rounded on Pierce, fury barely contained. "So you've cursed us all? Bound the ocean to your damn name?" Pierce met his glare without flinching. "Would you rather it had chosen yours?" The silence that followed was sharp. Even Marlowe looked away first. They descended to the lower levels cautiously, lanterns raised, boots crunching on soaked floorboards. The barricade was splintered, seawater still pooling across the stone. But no drowned waited for them. Only the sound of the tide, sloshing in time with a pulse too regular to be natural. Ward paused at the cellar door. It still bore the spirals she had chalked earlier, now blurred and smudged by water. Her hand hovered near the wood. "It isn't finished down here," she murmured. "The root they carried shards for, it's still beneath us. The ritual may have collapsed, but the source remains." Pierce gestured for her to open it. She hesitated. "If we see it, we can't unsee it. Better than waiting blind." With shaking fingers, she unlatched the door. The stench rolled out first, salt and copper, mold and something sharper, like iron left too long in water. The steps led down into shadow. Marlowe lit a second lantern, jaw clenched, and took the lead this time. The cellar stretched wider than it had any right to. Its stone walls curved inward, forming an almost organic chamber, as though carved not by tools but by slow pressure. At its center lay the root. It was not wood, not stone, but something between, black and slick, with veins of faint luminescence pulsing through it. It writhed gently, as if breathing. The air around it shimmered faintly, distorting the light. Ward nearly dropped her lantern. That's it. The source. It isn't a mechanism at all. It's a seed. Marlowe raised his rifle, aiming at the pulsing mass. Then we burn it now. Put a bullet through it, soak it in oil, whatever it takes. Pierce's hand shot out, pressing the barrel down. Don't. The soldier's face twisted. Don't? It's the heart of the nightmare. Pierce's eyes never left the root. Because I can feel it. If you destroy it, it doesn't die, it looks for another vessel. And I've already given it one. The pulsing deepened, faster now, as though the root recognized his voice. Ward took a slow step back. It's tied to you. Every beat, every spiral, every drown that climbed these cliffs, they were only ever feeding what's inside you now. If it grows further. Her words trailed off. Pierce finished them. Then I stopped being myself. They sealed the cellar again, though the effort felt futile. The root's pulse echoed through the floorboards, through the walls, through Pierce's own veins. By the time they returned to the lantern chamber, daylight filtered weakly through the storm clouds outside. Marlowe slumped against the wall, dragging a flask from his coat. His hands shook as he unscrewed the cap. So what's the plan, detective? Sit here until your parasite decides to eat us alive? Or wait until the tide finishes swallowing the tower? Pierce didn't answer immediately. He stood by the window, studying the spiral in the sea. It had grown wider. The current pulled debris, gulls, even whole trees into its endless circle. Yet at the center, the lighthouse, it was eerily calm. Ward spoke instead. There's precedent. In older accounts, vessels who bore the hunger sometimes contained it for years. They lived lives, even held positions of power. But eventually the root consumes them, body and mind alike. Their names vanish from records. Their voices become the horn. Marlowe sneered. That's your comfort? He gets to live long enough to damn the rest of us with him? But Pierce finally turned, his gaze steady. No. It means there's time. Enough to learn if the binding can be severed. Ward blinked. You think there's a way to cut yourself free? He nodded once. If it can be bound, it can be unbound. But not here. This place is its ground. We need distance. We need to drag it away from its root. Marlowe let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Drag it away? You've seen the water. We're trapped in the center of that spiral. No boat could cross it. Then we wait until it shifts, Pierce said. Ward frowned. You think it will move? He looked back at the sea. The spiral was widening still, but it pulsed in rhythm with his heart. And he could feel it, faintly, tugging at his mind, whispering names he had never heard. Yes, he said quietly. It's already searching. It won't stay here forever. That night, the three of them slept fitfully in the upper chamber, taking shifts by the dim ember that once had been the lantern. The storm howled outside, though the lighthouse itself remained unnaturally steady. Pierce did not dream. He heard 1,000 voices murmuring beneath the waves, names rolling over each other in endless cadence. Some he recognized, old cases, lost souls. Others were foreign, ancient syllables that scraped against his mind. But one voice rose above them all. Pierce. It was not a call. Not yet a command. It was acknowledgement. He woke with his hand clenched around the revolver at his side, though the revolver was gone, swallowed by the ritual. Only the shape of its grip remained in his palm, seared like a scar. Ward stirred across the chamber, blinking sleep from her eyes. She studied him for a long moment before speaking softly. "You heard it, didn't you?" He nodded. "What did it say?" He met her gaze, voice flat. "My name." She closed her eyes, shivering. "Then it has begun." The plan was simple. Too simple, Marlowe argued, but simplicity was all they had. At dawn, they descended again into the flooded lower level, lanterns swinging. A half-rotted skiff rested against the wall where supplies had once been hauled from the shore. Its wood was warped, half swallowed by brine, but it floated when Ward tested it with her boot. "It'll hold," she said, though her voice wavered. Marlowe gave a bitter laugh. "Hold long enough to get swallowed whole, maybe. Look at that water." They all looked. The sea beyond the open archway was wrong. Not waves, not tide. The spiral continued, turning with patient inevitability, dragging the horizon into itself. But within the eye, the lighthouse's cradle, lay a glassy calm. Smooth, inviting, but no less a trap. Pierce studied it in silence. The spiral beat with his pulse. He could feel it, each revolution another echo of his name whispered by unseen lips. Ward crouched beside the skiff, tightening what rope remained. "If we time it right, we can cut across the calm before the current grips us. Once outside the spiral's heart, we angle with it. Use its pull to sling us outward." Marlowe spat into the water. "That's not sailing. That's suicide. Better than waiting here." Ward snapped. "You'd rather starve in a haunted tower?" Marlowe opened his mouth, but Pierce's voice cut through. "We try." They stared at him, but he didn't repeat it. He simply stepped into the skiff, boots heavy on the sodden wood. It rocked dangerously, but steadied. Reluctantly, the others followed. The first minutes were eerily calm. Marlowe rowed with stiff, powerful strokes, the oars cutting ripples across the flat water. Ward clutched her satchel to her chest, eyes fixed on the horizon. Pierce sat at the bow, hands resting on his knees, listening. At first it was only his own heartbeat, slow and deliberate. But soon the water began to hum in time. Each stroke of Marlowe's oars sent a vibration through the hull, matched by a whisper in Pierce's skull. "Pierce." The boat shuddered. Not from waves, there were none, but from something beneath. A dark shape slid under the surface, too large, too long. Ward gasped. "What was that?" "Don't look," Pierce said softly. Marlowe gritted his teeth, rowing harder. "What do you mean, don't look? There's something down there." "There always is," Pierce replied. They made it halfway across the calm before the spiral began to resist. The water no longer lay flat. It tilted subtly at first, then stronger, drawing them sideways. The boat creaked as Marlowe fought the pull, muscles straining, sweat streaking his face. Ward leaned over the side, pointing. "There, ride the angle!" Marlowe cursed but obeyed, letting the current catch the skiff's stern. For a moment, they surged forward, carried outward by the spiral's own rhythm. The horizon grew nearer. Then the sea spoke. Not with voices this time, but with movement. Hands broke the surface. Dozens at first, then hundreds, clawing upward from the depths. Waterlogged fingers reached for the boat, nails scraping wood. Faces rose next, pale, bloated, mouths open in silent screams. The drowned, pulled from below by the same rhythm that bound Pierce's heart. Ward shrieked. Marlowe swung an oar, smashing skulls, but more surface to replace them. The skiff rocked violently. Pierce did not move. He sat rigid at the bow, staring at the figures. Their eyes, all of them, were fixed on him. Not attacking. Not clawing. Reaching. "Row!" Ward screamed. Marlowe obeyed, pulling with every ounce of strength. The skiff lurched forward, dragging free of grasping hands. But the drowned followed, their heads bobbing above the water in concentric lines, perfectly aligned with the spiral. Ward clutched Pierce's arm. "They're not after us. They're after you." He turned slowly to meet her gaze. "I know." And as he said it, one of the drowned pulled itself half onto the skiff. Its skin sloughed like wet parchment, its jaw unhinging far too wide. But it didn't lunge for Ward or Marlowe. It whispered, "Pierce." Marlowe smashed its skull with the oar, sending it tumbling back into the sea. But a dozen more replaced it, all whispering the same. "Pierce. Pierce. Pierce." The sound built until it was not whisper but chant, a chorus rising from the spiral itself. The horizon was close now. Waves at the edge of the spiral broke violently, colliding with the calm. If they could cross that line, perhaps escape lay beyond. "Almost there!" Ward shouted. Marlowe gave one last furious heave of the oars. The skiff shot forward, scraping over the invisible boundary. And stopped. Not by wave or wind. By weight. Dozens of drowned clung to the hull, their hands embedded in the wood, dragging them back. The boat shuddered, groaned, threatened to split. Marlowe bellowed, swinging wildly with the oar. Ward stabbed with a broken shard of wood. But there were too many. Pierce rose. He stood at the bow, arms spread, and the chant grew deafening. The drowned did not pull harder, they stilled, every sodden face raised to him. "Pierce," they chorused. He looked down at them, then at the horizon just beyond reach. He could feel it, the spiral's heart beating in his chest, the root writhing beneath the lighthouse, all of it bound by his name. He took a breath. And he spoke. "Let go." The water trembled. The drowned obeyed. Fingers released the hull. The boat shot forward, carried by the momentum of Marlowe's last desperate stroke. It broke through the spiral's edge, crashing into wild open waves. The chant ceased. Silence, save for the roar of the sea. Ward collapsed, sobbing with relief. Marlowe fell back, chest heaving. Pierce sat once more, his face unreadable. But inside, he felt the pull tighten. The drowned had obeyed not because he commanded them, because he was theirs. By nightfall, they reached a jagged coastline. Rocks tore the skiff to splinters, but they staggered ashore, drenched and bleeding, the lighthouse a distant shadow behind them. Marlowe collapsed onto the shingle, laughing madly. "We did it! We're out! By God, we're out!" Ward didn't answer. She knelt on the stones, staring back at the sea. The spiral was still visible, faint but vast, radiating outward from the black shape of the lighthouse. "It's not over," she whispered. Pierce stood beside her, the salt wind tearing at his coat. His heartbeat still matched the rhythm of the waves. "No," he said. And though he did not speak it aloud, he knew the truth. The farther they went, the more the spiral would stretch to follow. Because it was not bound to the lighthouse anymore. It was bound to him. The village was little more than a scatter of cottages pressed against the black spine of the coast. Nets hung stiff with salt on leaning poles. Boats lay overturned, their hulls cracked by years of storms. There was no church bell, no market square, only the smell of brine and wood smoke clinging to the low wind. Marlowe spotted it first through the morning mist. "Civilization," he croaked, voice raw from salt water and shouting. "Or what passes for it?" Ward didn't answer. Her eyes had not left the sea since they staggered onto the shore. Even now, as they trudged across shingle and broken shells, she kept glancing back at the horizon where the lighthouse's silhouette still stood. Pierce walked in silence between them. The sea behind him was not silent, not to his ears. Each step echoed with the spiral's pulse, a rhythm that matched his own. The drowned still whispered, though faint now, like memory carried on the tide. They entered the village by way of a crooked lane between cottages. Curtains twitched as they passed. Faces peeked out, hollow-eyed, wary, all marked by the sea. The villagers did not greet them, but neither did they bar their way. At the center of the cluster stood a longhouse with nets strung across its beams. Smoke curled from the chimney. An old man sat on the step, carving at driftwood with a knife worn smooth. He looked up as they approached. "Strangers," he said simply. His voice was deep, gravel dragged through tide pools. Ward stepped forward, forcing steadiness into her tone. "We came from the lighthouse. The sea wrecked us. We need shelter, food, passage inland if possible." The old man paused his carving. His eyes shifted to Pierce. For a heartbeat too long, he stared. Then he spat into the dirt. "Best you hadn't," he muttered. Marlowe bristled. "What's that supposed to mean?" The man returned to his carving. "The light's been cursed since before my father's father. Anyone that goes there brings its hunger back with them." His knife sliced into the wood with a sharp crack. "You'll find no welcome here." Ward's jaw tightened. "We're not asking for welcome. Just rest." The old man did not refuse, but neither did he nod. He only stared again at Pierce, then turned and called into the longhouse. A woman appeared, his daughter perhaps, though her hair was gray and her back bent. She carried bowls of something hot, thick with fish and roots. Without a word, she handed them over and retreated inside. They ate on the step in silence. Marlowe tore into his food with savage hunger. Ward forced hers down in slow bites. Pierce held the bowl but did not lift it. His appetite was gone. The sea had replaced it. The old man finally spoke. "Storm's been strange this season. Tide cuts wrong, fish swim backward in their nets. Last night we heard the waves chanting names." His gaze flicked again to Pierce. "Yours among them." Pierce met his eyes. "You heard it." The man's hand trembled on the knife. He looked away. "Don't say it. Brings the sound closer." Ward set down her bowl. "Then you know what it is." "No one knows." The old man shook his head. "We only endure. The light keeps it out there, far enough most nights. But when it falters, we feel it in our sleep. Dreams of drowning. Dreams of spirals that don't end." Marlowe cursed under his breath. "We nearly died stopping that thing. And you're telling me it was holding the line?" The old man said nothing. Pierce stood, setting his untouched bowl aside. The chant in his skull had grown louder with every word spoken. The villagers were already infected by the rhythm. Not by choice, but by proximity. "We can't stay here," he said. Ward looked at him sharply. "We're in no condition to travel. And inland's a week on foot. If we stay, the spiral spreads," Pierce replied. His tone carried no force, only fact. "They'll hear it. Then they'll follow it." Marlowe slammed his bowl down. "Follow it? Who?" Before Pierce could answer, the longhouse door burst open. The gray-haired woman staggered out, clutching her head. Blood streamed from her nose. She gasped once, then collapsed into the dirt. The old man dropped his knife, rushing to her side. "Marta! Marta!" Her body convulsed. Her lips moved, but no words came, only the rhythm, the beat of waves against stone. Then her voice split, layered, echoing with the drowned chorus. "Pierce!" The old man froze, horror widening his eyes. He looked at Pierce as though seeing him for the first time. Ward grabbed Pierce's arm. "We need to go. Now." Marlowe stood, fists clenched. "Where? Inland? Back to the lighthouse?" Where the hell do we go? The old man's daughter opened her mouth again. Blood bubbled. The vessel breaks. The hollow feeds. Then she was still. The old man cradled her, rocking silently. Around them, shutters slammed closed. Doors barred. The village was sealing itself against them. Pierce turned toward the road leading inland. Away from the sea. The path wound through heather and stone, climbing the cliffs. Behind them, the village huddled silent. Beyond, the lighthouse was a black tooth against the horizon, its spiral faint but unbroken. They walked in silence for an hour before Marlowe spoke. His voice was low, almost fearful. You didn't even touch her. And still she spoke your name. Pierce said nothing. Ward's face was pale, drawn tight. It's spreading. Whatever tether the lighthouse held is broken. You carry it now. Pierce glanced at her. Then you know why we can't stop. Marlowe barked a bitter laugh. And where exactly do you propose we go? You think you can outrun the sea? Outwalk a curse? No, Pierce said. His voice was calm. But I can meet it. Away from others. Where it can't feed. Ward shook her head. You're talking about exile. That's not survival. It's protection, Pierce answered. They crested the ridge. Ahead lay miles of moorland, broken only by standing stones and the faint smoke of villages farther inland. Behind, the sea stretched endless, the spiral faint but present, pulsing still with his heartbeat. Ward followed his gaze. It'll come, no matter where we go. Pierce did not deny it. Night fell before they reached shelter. A ruined chapel crouched on the moor, its walls half collapsed, roof open to stars. They lit a small fire in the nave, though the smoke stung their eyes with damp ash. Marlowe sat with his back against the wall, pistol across his lap. I should never have left the city. Never should have listened to either of you. Ward ignored him, staring into the flames. Her lips moved soundlessly, as if she rehearsed words she could not speak aloud. Pierce walked among the shadows of the chapel, running his hand along stone worn smooth by centuries. The walls hummed faintly, not with the spiral, but with something older. He could not name it, but it felt steadier, less devouring. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Outside. Not one set, many. He drew his revolver, motioning the others to silence. The footsteps circled the chapel, shuffling on stone. Then they stopped. Voices whispered. Not the drowned chorus this time, but human, low and fearful. He's here! The one from the sea. The name in the waves. Ward gripped her knife. Marlowe cocked his pistol. Pierce stepped into the doorway. Outside, figures stood in the moonlight, villagers from the coast, perhaps others drawn from farther. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes wide. They did not carry weapons, only torches. When they saw him, they fell silent. Then, as one, they knelt. Pierce, they murmured. Ward's knife trembled in her hand. They're worshipping you. Marlowe cursed. No. Not him. The thing inside him. Pierce's heart beat once, twice, in perfect rhythm with the spiral. The villagers bowed lower. And for the first time, he felt the weight of it. Not hunger. Not fear. Power. The hollow was not just following him. It was spreading through him. And others were ready to receive it. Dawn broke over the moor in muted shades of gray. The ruined chapel crouched among the heather like a half-forgotten memory. The fire had long since died to embers, and the cold seeped into their bones. Pierce moved among the shadows, eyes tracing the outline of the kneeling villagers outside. Even at this distance, he could sense the pulse, the spiral, thrumming faintly within them. Not a heartbeat, but something older, something echoing across generations. Ward sat against the nave wall, head bowed, eyes never leaving him. Marlowe was sprawled nearby, muttering under his breath, pistol forgotten. Neither spoke much. The air was thick with unasked questions and unacknowledged fear. Pierce stepped to the doorway, letting the dawn's cold light brush his face. The villagers had begun to stir, rising slowly, their movements careful, reverent. Eyes followed him, not with hostility, but all. "You're awake," murmured an elderly man, stepping forward, cane tapping against the stone floor. "We've felt it since nightfall. The vessel carries it." Pierce did not answer. Every instinct screamed that he should flee, yet some part of him, a part he barely recognized, welcomed the attention. The spiral pulsed in rhythm with the villagers' breathing. They were attuned. They were ready. Ward's voice cut through the growing silence. "Pierce, don't let it take hold." He turned to her. The warmth in her eyes and the warning in her tone both anchored him briefly to the world he still recognized. "I am not yet," he said softly, though the spiral hummed beneath his ribs, nudging at the edges of his will. Marlowe groaned. "Not yet? You're practically radiating it. They're practically crawling inside your head, and you're just standing there?" Pierce ignored him. His gaze returned to the villagers. "You have questions," he said, voice low, carrying far across the moor. "Questions about the light, about what came from the lighthouse. I will answer. But you must listen, and you must obey the pattern. There is no other way." The villagers nodded. Some shivered. Some trembled with fear. All obeyed. The day passed in silence, broken only by murmurs of questions and Pierce's quiet replies. He spoke of the lighthouse, of the spiral, of the hollow force that fed upon the sea and had chosen him. Some absorbed his words eagerly. Others recoiled. But none challenged him openly. Ward kept close, watching him, seeing the changes that no one else could. His posture had shifted subtly. His eyes glimmered with an unnatural focus. He moved among the villagers, and the air around him seemed to bend. The spiral responded to his presence, and those near him felt it, though they did not know its nature. Marlowe paced, restless and muttering. "You're drawing them in. You're turning them into worshippers of something that'll eat them alive." Pierce did not answer. He could hear it, every thought, every pulse, every quiet dread in the villagers' minds. It was intoxicating. A surge of control unlike anything he had ever felt. A child approached him, no more than 8, eyes wide and trusting. "Will it hurt me?" the child asked softly. Pierce knelt, placing a hand on the child's shoulder. The spiral pulsed through his fingers, and the child shivered, then smiled faintly. "It will protect you," Pierce whispered. "But it is not kind. It is not cruel. It is what waits." The villagers watched, fascinated and fearful. Murmurs spread. A woman crossed herself, then nodded. Another began to hum a tune that seemed to harmonize with the spiral. A pattern was forming. They were listening, learning, attuning themselves to the vessel. Ward's voice broke through again. "You can't let this happen. You can't control it. It controls you." Pierce shook his head. "No. Not yet. But it listens. It waits for the right moment. And if I do not guide it, it will take everything indiscriminately." As night fell, the chapel became a cathedral of shadows. The villagers lit torches, placing them in precise patterns outside. The spiral hummed louder, resonating with the layout. Pierce stood at the threshold, hands slightly raised, feeling the force coil around him like a living thing. Marlowe leaned against the wall. "You look like a king of some cursed empire," he muttered. "And they're all your subjects." Pierce did not respond. The spiral pulsed, and with each beat, he felt the hollow inside stir. A whisper, not human, not entirely intelligible, fed into his mind. The vessel is ready. The hollow feeds. They will obey. Ward grabbed his arm. Fight it! If you succumb, they're lost. You're lost. He shook his head, struggling. The voices, the spiral, were seductive, urging, promising understanding, power, survival. They whispered of knowledge from beneath the waves, of history written in currents and tides, of a hunger older than the rocks themselves. And then, just for a moment, he understood. Not with his eyes or ears, but with every cell, every pulse. He saw through the spiral, the lighthouse, the void within, the vessel, the hollow. He understood its pattern, its hunger, and the terrible symmetry that governed it. The first test came unexpectedly. A villager, a young man named Jonas, stumbled toward the chapel with a knife. His eyes were wild. The spiral in him had not yet accepted guidance, it rebelled. You can't command me, Jonas shouted, voice shaking. I won't be part of your hunger. Pierce stepped forward. The hollow inside him responded instantly, tendrils of influence stretching outward. Jonas froze mid-step, eyes widening. Pierce felt the pull of the spiral into the boy's mind, the hunger testing, probing, searching for weakness. Ward gasped. Pierce, don't. But he did not stop. He focused. Not with malice, not with cruelty, but with precision. He let the hollow inside reach out, not to consume, but to guide. Jonas trembled, fell to his knees, and finally lowered the knife. His mind, raw and panicked, aligned with the pattern. He obeyed, though not entirely willingly, and the hollow receded slightly, leaving Pierce breathless. Marlowe stared. You just bent him to it. Like he was a puppet. No, Pierce said quietly. Like he was waiting to see the right hand. Ward's hands shook. The right hand? Pierce, you're not guiding it. You're becoming it. He did not answer. The hollow pulsed, and with it, the villagers began to kneel, eyes fixed on him. Outside, the torches flared, illuminating the moor with a rhythm in sync with the spiral. Pierce realized the truth he had long feared. The spiral was no longer distant. It was him. And what it fed upon, it would feed upon him. Yet, he could choose its path. Hours passed. The chapel became a nexus of power. Every villager, every torch, every whispered chant tuned to the rhythm of the hollow. It spoke in their voices, in the wind, in the waves far beyond the cliffs. Pierce moved among them, adjusting, guiding, pushing back the hunger when it threatened to consume. Ward never left his side, a constant reminder of the humanity still clinging to him. Marlowe remained skeptical, angry, but alive, a tether to the ordinary world. And then, as midnight approached, the first visions arrived. Pierce saw the lighthouse collapsing in his mind's eye, spires breaking, light extinguished. He saw the spiral escaping into the ocean, finding new vessels, new mouths. He saw villages like the one behind him, twisted into shadows of themselves. And he saw himself, alone, a beacon and a cage at once. He staggered, catching himself on the altar stone. The hollow pulsed violently, testing, probing. But he stood firm. He would guide it. He would shape it. And in that moment, he became more than a vessel. He became the first sentinel. The villagers began to chant, softly at first, harmonizing with the spiral. Then louder, stronger, a tide of voices rising like waves. Pierce raised a hand, and the chant shifted, bending, folding into new rhythms. Ward whispered, almost to herself, "You're doing it, but at what cost?" He looked at her, seeing the fear, the love, the pleading. "The cost is not mine alone," he said. "But someone must bear it. Marlowe groaned, looking at the kneeling villagers. You're shaping a cult. A force that'll spread. God help us all. Pierce did not reply. He closed his eyes, listening to the hollow, feeling the spiral, guiding it, bending it. And for the first time, he felt the paradox: power and restraint, hunger and control, darkness and human will intertwined. Outside, the torches flared against the moor, signaling to the world that the vessel had awakened. Somewhere, far beyond the cliffs, the lighthouse pulsed faintly, a dim heartbeat in resonance with the hollow within him. And Pierce knew, with absolute clarity, that the spiral was not done. It had only begun. The morning fog hung low over the moor, curling around the ruined chapel like a living thing. Pierce stood on the threshold, gazing at the village beyond, a labyrinth of narrow streets and stone cottages. The spiral pulsed faintly beneath his ribs, a heartbeat within him that demanded attention. It had grown restless overnight, whispers slicing through his mind, urging, questioning, pushing. Ward approached silently, her eyes scanning the horizon. "It's awake," she said simply. Her tone carried no accusation, only acknowledgement. "I know," Pierce replied, voice low, almost drowned by the wind. "And it's testing me." Marlowe appeared at his side, carrying the ledger from the chapel. Its pages fluttered in the morning breeze, though no wind blew. "Testing? Pierce, it's running through the village already. People are different. Some of them don't even recognize each other." Pierce clenched his fists. The hollow force inside him was not just present, it was asserting itself beyond the boundaries of the chapel. He could feel it in the air, in the shivering reeds along the moor, in the distant cliffs where gulls circled unnaturally, as if the very landscape had tuned to its frequency. He could no longer separate the village from the spiral. Every thought, every heartbeat of the villagers, every pulse of fear and wonder was entangled with him. He was a conductor for a symphony whose notes were not music but hunger. By midday, Pierce had returned to the chapel to reassess the situation. The villagers, now more synchronized than the day before, moved in patterns he had taught them, their chants harmonizing with the spiral. But there were anomalies. A boy named Emile had begun to resist, mumbling phrases in defiance, his eyes glazed with confusion. Another, an elderly woman, collapsed mid-chant, clutching her chest as if something inside had twisted. The spiral reacted violently, thrumming in Pierce's chest, sending sharp pulses of pain through his skull. Ward grabbed his arm. "Pierce, it's too strong. You're losing control." He shook his head, staggering back. "No. Not yet. But it's adapting. It learns." Marlowe slammed the ledger onto the altar. "Adapts? It's infecting them, turning them into extensions of whatever that thing is. You have to stop it before it spreads beyond this moor." Pierce inhaled sharply, forcing himself to calm. Every pulse of the spiral was a wave of temptation, a voice offering power beyond reckoning. He could reach out, dominate, enforce obedience completely, but to do so risked annihilating the villagers' minds entirely, erasing their individuality. And yet, outside the chapel, he sensed other currents. Shadows along the cliffs, wind patterns that whispered his name, and far beyond, the lighthouse, its beacon dim but rhythmic. It called to him, a metronome of the hollow's will, syncing with the spiral inside. Pierce turned to Ward. "If we fail, it doesn't just stay here. It spreads. Like oil across water. We've bound it temporarily, but the vessel, me, it's failing. I can feel the cracks forming." Ward's eyes widened. "Then what do we do? You're the only one who can stop it." "I may not be able to," he admitted. "Not entirely. But I can guide it long enough to contain it, to choose its next path, or its next vessel." The first confrontation came unexpectedly. A trio of villagers, led by Emil, marched toward the chapel with torches and sharpened stakes. The spiral had failed to fully assimilate Emil's mind, and he had become a conduit for its rebellion, the force inside him amplifying resistance. Pierce stepped outside, hands raised, focusing on the energy that coiled within him. "Stop!" he commanded, voice carrying unnaturally far. The spiral pulsed, reaching outward, probing the minds of the three. Emil's gaze locked onto Pierce. "You can't control us all. Not everyone will bend," he shouted. His voice carried a resonance, a vibration that struck Pierce like a hammer. The spiral surged, testing the boundaries of its influence, twisting against him as if it, too, resisted being guided. Ward moved to his side. "Pierce, don't fight it alone. You need me to anchor you." Pierce exhaled sharply. The hollow pulsed violently, and for a moment he felt the world tilt. Shadows bent toward him, the villagers wavered, and the lighthouse beacon outside brightened, as if reacting to his turmoil. He reached deep within, touching the core of the spiral, guiding it not with domination but with understanding. He felt Emil's mind, raw and defiant, and mirrored it with the pulse of the spiral, absorbing the rebellion into rhythm rather than force. Emil faltered, collapsing to his knees, his resistance diffusing. The other two villagers stared, wide-eyed, trembling. Pierce lowered his hands, letting the spiral recede slightly, retreating into him rather than outward. Marlowe breathed heavily. "That was incredible. But dangerous. You can't do that again without..." Ward finished his thought. "Without losing yourself." Pierce nodded, grim. The spiral was not just a tool. It was a living, adaptive intelligence, probing for weaknesses, questioning his will. Every exertion brought him closer to losing his humanity. As night fell, the hollow's influence intensified. The lighthouse's beacon pulsed in sync with the spiral, sending subtle tremors through the village. Pierce sensed new patterns forming, currents that moved beyond him, shaping the moor and its inhabitants in ways he could not fully control. He called Ward aside. "We need to go to the cliffs. The lighthouse. It's the source, or at least the amplifier. If we sever its link..." Ward shook her head. "You'll expose yourself completely. The hollow knows you. It's inside you. If you touch the lighthouse..." "I have no choice," he interrupted. "If I don't, it will break free. And then, it will find a vessel, any vessel, and it will spread beyond this village, beyond the moor. Cities, oceans, continents." Marlowe joined them, ledger in hand. "And you think you can just walk into the lighthouse, and what? Talk it into submission?" Pierce gave no answer. The spiral pulsed, louder now, reacting to his thoughts. The air thickened, charged with unseen energy. He could feel the hollow's awareness expanding, probing for his intent. The climb to the lighthouse was treacherous. Crumbling stone stairs, gusting winds, and cliffs that dropped sharply to the sea below. Yet Pierce felt no hesitation. Every step synchronized with the hollow, every pulse guiding his muscles, his heart, his mind. Ward and Marlowe followed, tethered to him not just by trust, but by necessity. As they reached the top, the lighthouse's interior sprawled before them like a cathedral of shadows. The spiral thrummed, and the walls themselves seemed to bend inward, shadows stretching unnaturally. The beacon above flickered erratically, casting irregular beams across the chamber. Pierce approached the central platform where the spiral's influence was strongest. Here, the hollow was concentrated, a coiled, sentient energy that radiated awareness. He knelt, placing his hands over the core. Pain flared instantly, a burning surge that threatened to tear his consciousness apart. The spiral hissed, whispering ancient tongues into his mind, pressing promises of power, knowledge, and dominion. Ward grabbed his arm. "Pierce, focus! Remember who you are!" Marlowe steadied himself against the railing, eyes wide. "He's going to. He's actually going to." Pierce's lips moved in silence, a chant in an ancient tongue he barely understood. The hollow pulsed against him, resisting, probing, testing. But he pushed further, merging will and force, consciousness and spiral. The vortex of energy above the lighthouse coiled, stilled, and bent. A voice, not his own, resonated in his skull. "You are the vessel. The hollow waits. The vessel must choose." He felt the weight of the choice. Total assimilation meant control over the spiral, but at the cost of becoming something other, losing all that made him human. Resistance meant the spiral could escape, consuming the village and beyond. He exhaled. "I choose," he whispered, not to the hollow, not to himself, but to the world. And the spiral answered, not with force, but with understanding. The final moments of Part 9 focus on Pierce asserting his will, aligning the hollow's energy with his own intent, and preparing to contain it without losing himself entirely. But the strain is immense, and the spiral reacts unpredictably, hinting that Part 10 will conclude the confrontation with catastrophic stakes beyond the lighthouse, determining the fate of the village and possibly the wider world. The wind howled around the lighthouse like a chorus of desperate souls. Pierce stood at the apex, hands pressed against the coiled heart of the spiral, feeling it pulse like a living thing. Its energy was immense now, stretching outward, lapping at the edges of consciousness, reaching toward the village, the cliffs, even beyond, toward the open sea. Ward gripped his arm tightly. "Pierce, it's stronger than ever. You can't." "I have to," he interrupted, his voice hoarse but resolute. "If I don't, the hollow escapes. There is no plan B." Marlowe held the ledger, pages fluttering wildly despite the absence of wind. Names blurred across the paper, some burning bright, others smudged, some vanishing entirely. Pierce's own name appeared multiple times, etched into reality itself, as if the spiral recognized him as both conduit and adversary. The hollow spoke, a voice without shape or gender, yet layered with countless whispers. "The vessel chooses. The hollow waits. The vessel must feed." Pierce inhaled, letting the spiral surge through him. Pain flared, sharp and deep, tearing at his bones and mind, yet he held firm. He could feel every heartbeat in the village, every pulse in the moor, every tremor in the cliffs. The hollow was a predator, testing his limits, probing for weakness. He focused. Not on dominating, not on feeding, but on containment. The spiral was aware of his intent, resisting, twisting, bending, yet he guided it with precise intention. He could feel the threshold. One step further, and he would lose himself entirely. Ward's voice cut through the storm. "Pierce, you're not alone. You can anchor it through me." He nodded, pulling her into the circle of his control. The hollow reacted violently, pushing outward in shockwaves that rattled the lighthouse, snapping stone and metal. Pierce held firm, letting Ward's presence tether his consciousness, a lifeline to humanity amid the maelstrom. Marlowe shouted from the edge of the platform. "The village! They're rising! The spiral is trying to escape!" Pierce's eyes snapped open. Below, the villagers moved as one, shadows of themselves, distorted by the hollow's influence. But he noticed subtle resistance, tiny acts of defiance, stammers of individuality. His effort had not been wasted. Every pulse he sent resonated, awakening fragments of their will. The hollow shrieked, a soundless roar that tore through the lighthouse and the cliffs beyond. Shadows stretched, thickened, forming appendages that clawed at stone and air alike. Pierce pressed the spiral inward, folding it into a coiled prison of energy, his own consciousness interwoven with its force. The beacon above flared erratically, spinning as though alive. The spiral pulled toward it, drawn to the light, seeking a conduit. Pierce adjusted his focus, guiding the energy downward, into the lighthouse itself, containing its momentum. He could feel it struggle, pushing, clawing, testing every boundary. Ward whispered, "You can do it, Pierce, just a little longer." A shadow shot across the platform, elongated, grotesque. The hollow was manifesting, trying to break physical form, extending tendrils toward the world. Pierce met it with sheer force of will, intertwining with the spiral, locking its shape into containment. The shadows flailed, shrieking, then thinned, receding into the coil he had formed. Marlowe dropped the ledger, its pages scattering. Names vanished as the spiral's energy solidified under Pierce's control. The village below stilled, the unnatural alignment dissipating. The wind shifted, softer now, carrying the faint scent of salt and damp earth rather than decay and hunger. But the struggle was not yet over. Pierce felt a pressure inside him, a gnawing insistence. The spiral was alive, aware of his intent, testing the boundaries of the human mind. One wrong move, one faltering thought, and it would erupt, breaking free, consuming all. He closed his eyes, summoning every fragment of concentration, every tether to the world outside himself. Memories of the village, Ward's determination, Marlowe's courage, all became anchors stabilizing him. The spiral pulsed, a storm within a storm, then slowly, almost imperceptibly, it bent, folding in upon itself. The lighthouse trembled violently, stone cracking under the pressure. Pierce could feel the hollow screaming inside him, a tide of consciousness against a dam of will. He focused harder, shaping the energy, turning force into form. And then silence. Not a quiet, but a settling. The hollow had retracted, contained, bound to the lighthouse itself. Pierce slumped to his knees, exhausted, sweat and salt crusting his skin. Ward and Marlowe rushed to his side, holding him upright. "We did it," Ward whispered, disbelief in her voice. Pierce shook his head slowly. "Not us. It's still here. Contained but aware. Waiting. Patient." Marlowe's eyes darted to the spiral's core, now a faint glow within the lighthouse. "Can it break free again?" Pierce exhaled sharply. "Eventually. Time is a thin thread. We've delayed the inevitable, not prevented it. But for now, it sleeps." Below, the village stirred. Life resumed in broken rhythms, people looking at each other with confusion, their memories of the spiral's influence fading but leaving faint shadows of awareness. Pierce felt relief tempered with dread. The hollow had left its mark on every mind it touched, a latent echo that might awaken under the wrong conditions. He rose, unsteady but determined. "We need to reinforce the boundaries. Ward, help me set wards along the cliffs, the lighthouse, the moor. Marlowe, document everything, the spiral, its patterns, its reach. The knowledge must survive, even if we cannot." Ward nodded. "And if it wakes again?" Pierce's gaze swept across the cliffs, the village, the restless sea. "Then we'll be ready. But we cannot fight it with force alone. Understanding, vigilance, patience, that is our weapon." Marlowe closed the ledger, the pages now blank save for the cover. "And the vessel? You survived because of it." Pierce ran a hand through his hair, the spiral's pulse a faint echo within him. "The vessel is both prison and key. And sometimes, it is the only bridge between the hollow and the world it craves." The lighthouse beacon dimmed, then stabilized, casting a steady light over the cliffs. The moor lay quiet, the villagers returned to their lives, but Pierce knew the calm was fragile. The hollow waited. Always. Patient. Hungry. He turned to Ward and Marlowe. "We cannot let complacency set in. Every structure, every ritual, every barrier we build, it is a temporary reprieve. We've bought time, but the price is eternal vigilance. They nodded, understanding the weight of the task. The spiral had been bound, yes, but the hollow itself remained. And Pierce, the vessel, would forever carry a pulse of its will, a constant reminder of what slumbered beneath the cliffs, beyond the lighthouse, in the darkness between worlds. The wind howled again, this time carrying the distant call of seabirds, the rush of waves against jagged rock, and a faint echo that only Pierce could hear. We wait. We remember. We hunger. Pierce clenched his fists. Then we wait with them. But we do not bow. The sun began to rise, painting the horizon with pale gold. The lighthouse stood as a sentinel, a cage, and a warning. The moor was silent. The village slept. And in that stillness, Pierce felt the hollow's presence fold neatly back into the world contained, for now. But he knew the truth: vigilance was not enough. Understanding was not enough. Patience alone could not hold an ancient, conscious force bound. It was a war of minds, a battle of wills, and the first day of an eternal watch had begun.